was plus Dutch for cheers.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Hello, peeps. Welcome to Beyond Binary Thinking. We have some wonderful guests today, but first I just want to thank our first couple of Patreons. Really good to see. I have put the money to good use. I've actually started paying some of our former guests on their Patreon, so I sort of paid it forwards this time. But no, I do really appreciate it, and a big shout out to Will Owen, a super fan, for his kind words. We are very blessed today to be joined by Rosario Blue, a freelance journalist with Tech Radar, amongst others, and the Ranting Minority, wonderful YouTuber. I will put links to both of their stuff below. It is such a pleasure to have you both here today. Please tell us where you're from, what you're about, and what you'd like to discuss today.
Well, particularly gaming, tech, music, culture. Like I do a lot of hyperlocal journalism. I'm from Peckham, Southeast London. But I've been around, like I've been everywhere, and kind of live in Scotland too. It's hard to say you live anywhere when you're a journalist, but yeah, basically, actually, I've been in lockdown in Scotland. Thank goodness we have Miss Sturgeon, who's not playing at all of our lives, so I haven't been able to leave since February last year. Yay! But yeah, I love gaming. Passionate about race, politics. Everything, music,
all the fun things. Awesome.
Games. But yeah.
Ranting, over to you, mate.
I'm the Ranting Minority. I'm a YouTuber, and I'm a student also at the University of South Alabama, where I'm studying English and theory. I've been doing YouTube for a little bit under a year. It'll be a year and a few months, I believe. And I also like talking about race and politics. I found a passion in those type of things as the years went by. My channel mostly focused on theory and more response to narratives about the Black community from typically right-wing sources.
Reaction videos do well in the algorithm, but both of you do fantastic content with really exploring the nuance. So just reading your blog article, Rosario, and checking out your videos, I knew we'd have a good conversation. I approached you both with some ideas. I'm not going to play the caricature of the centrist devil's advocate too hard today, but I would like to kind of, ask some awkward questions and get into the meat of it, so to speak, if you'll allow me. So let's go hard off the bat. When do terms like privilege and white fragility hurt more than they help?
Should I go first, or?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll let you take that one.
It's actually, this is one of those situations where I don't think it's necessarily entirely fair to give my opinion as a Black person, because it's not a term that's used against me. Like, but what I can do is try and think about how I would feel if it was the other way around. Which again, it's still to say the other way around when I only know what it's like to be Black, which, I mean, I love it, but in terms of like treatment and so on and so forth, it's not always the best. I don't think it helps. And I get why it needs to be said. I understand why it's being said. I believe it all. I agree as well. I just think that if it was me and someone's telling me that I'm, fragile, I have this privilege, which I actually do think the privilege is quite obvious. But again, having to labor the point so much means that it clearly isn't obvious. People get their back up when they're criticized. We're only human. No one likes to be told they're bad or they've done bad things. Even when you bring up like anything to do with racism, like, oh, this behavior might have been racist, or you might have acted in a certain racist way, or it's your white privilege that has helped you to get to where you are today, and then they're looking around thinking, wait a minute, hold on a second, if I'm privileged, where's all my money? Why hasn't my whiteness gotten me far? And I think it's the lack of understanding, because it just feels like they're being attacked. rather than that. If they stop and actually think about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be rich, or white privilege means that you will gain access to every single space. I also think tone and intent is a big part of it. I think a lot of Black people or people of other races, other than white, can feel dead, exhausted. You know, from the time that you're born, from the time that you're a child, you're seeing and hearing all this information about why your race has been treated badly. You know, as young as I can remember, I think I would have been year 2, Black History Month. So year 2, I would have been like 8, I think, in primary school. And I remember we were learning about the slave trade. It was obviously a much more like watered down version, as I found out as I grew up. But to start learning this type of like history before you're even taught that you are amazing, you are fantastic, you can be whatever you want to be, it's really damaging. Whereas as a young white child, pretty sure they didn't have to be introduced to that early anyway, to a history that is laden with slavery, abuse, incarceration, like everything, you know, as I'm sure we'll get into it later on. But it can be triggering, and people are human. And if they hear something that they feel they can't relate to, they will immediately fight back. And it's hard for them to get to a point of listening to hear an explanation, because people just simply don't like criticism. I don't like to be criticized. But I am someone who is very self-reflective. So I'll always go back and think about something. Even if my immediate reaction is to say, no, that's not me, I'll eventually always go back and like think, okay, you know, is there something that I didn't get right? Like, why would they say that? Like, you know, so I think it's harmful. I think it's shown that it's harmful. Let's be real. You know, there's a very small proportion of society that seems to have adopted it or understood it and accepted it. Whereas there's a massive, massive growing group of people in every single space, that's from gaming to politics, you know, that just are fighting against it. But yeah, so.
Can I say, set the scene brilliantly, exactly as I hope that question would. Ranting minority, over to you.
I don't believe they're harmful in the sense that I think they push people away. I believe once people are like more educated on the oppressive side, the kind of conclusion of you not having that oppression pent against you comes naturally, if that makes sense. So terms like white privilege and all that, I don't think it's wrong to address those terms, but I feel like it's also important to be able to explain those terms in a way where people aren't like taking that as you're saying I'm getting things for being white, because that's how most people who don't know what white privilege is assume that to be. But if you explain like, hey, Black people deal with X, Y, Z, white people don't deal with X, Y, or Z, then they kind of like, oh, that is sort of a privilege, so to speak. So I wouldn't say it's harmful until maybe the question is coming more about proving to someone that they have privilege versus more attention like pulled away from, you know, actually trying to address issues that we're trying to, you know, close the gap with this privilege, so to speak.
Would you say it's often framed by the right as damaging to the dialogue, but only because they've misframed what it means?
Oh yeah,
when
for
does
sure.
the right sorry.
Every time white privilege comes up in a right wing circle, they're like, oh, they're saying you're being given things for being white. Everything's handed to you for being white, which is, no one's really saying that. It's more that people have to like start to understand that white is unfortunately the standard in European and Western culture. And that kind of leaves everyone else who isn't that to the sidelines. I
think like when does the right not take things like and then twist it? And actually, you know, I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off, but
please do. Yes, that's good.
The left not do the same thing? Like, you know, there's so many similarities between the two. I know it's, you know, it's kind of wrong to say it, but there is in many ways, obviously very different ideals and stuff. But the right, I mean, a lot of the things that they do is to I guess, shock people into being like, oh my God, this is bad. No, we got to fight against it. You know, like homosexuality, your kids, they're trying to make your kids, they've got an agenda trying to make your kids gay. Like, you know, like, yeah, it's just it's always the worst type of like scaremongering.
And I'll just say that there's a bit of nuance I think needed there. That when we talk about right and left, it's often not clearly stated that we're probably referring to talking heads that make a living out of this sort of punditry, rather than the average person who might identify as right or left, who probably has more nuance if you talk to them one-on-one.
Yep, definitely.
If you weren't grifting a political cause daily for talking points. I
think that's the sad thing, just in general. Anyway, when it comes to your political leanings, there's a loss of humanity in the sense that you are just left and you are just right, and that's all people see. You know, it's to the point where it can actually, you know, it can tear apart like families, friendships. I don't know if it's down to just being older now or not, like, but I swear I just don't remember it being like that. Like, I don't remember it being so polarizing where if someone voted, I don't know, Conservative or Republican, that's it, you're the worst, I hate you.
I imagine sort of 80s, right? Thatcher, Reagan.
Well, I don't remember like that time at all. Like, I mean,
I think every generation believes their generation is the most important political battle ever. And
but wasn't that more about the person?
The difference is, I used to only encounter my racist uncle like once a year at the family gathering, and now I'm connected with him on Facebook, so he can broadcast his views at me regularly.
True. But yeah, I think the right is the right talking heads, should I say, are willfully ignorant. Everything usually is about them getting offended about something without really actually listening. You know, a lot of the issues would be sorted out if people actively listened, didn't just wait to argue or say no. You know, like, if it actually is not that difficult to understand. And I think at times actually they do get it. They just feel like if they agree, then somehow they're acquiescing to some dark, like, you know, like horrible control or like mind control or something. But the damage of them not even trying to listen and understand is you know what we see today in society.
I also think their audience might be a little bit of a crutch on them as well. I feel like they're constantly like, those ideas are constantly reinforced by their audience and their circle. So even when they do like step out of line and pick a more leftist take, like for Tommy Lauren, for example, she stated that she was pro-choice instead of pro-like life, which is very unconservative of her, and she lost almost everything. I feel like they don't want you to even like be honest with yourself. Like,
it's often talked about these parasocial relationships, but it works both ways, right? People become beholden to their fans and the algorithm, and it kind of steers them on a course, right? That's probably why thinking tends to diverge and become so binary, right?
You can't deviate from any type of, like, you know, again, you know, I find myself always falling into the center because I tend to always feel like I'm on the outside looking in. You know, I'm always looking at both sides. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I can see where they're coming from with you know, right-leaning people. I can see where they're coming from. I don't agree, but I can see where you're coming from. The left, I definitely align more with in terms of just, you know, ideology, like just beliefs that you know, I just don't agree with a lot of the approaches sometimes. And so I tend to sit in the middle, and I notice that if you're left leaning, you can't deviate from the groupthink of it, to say. Same with the right, like that's, you know, she was a great example about what happens if you deviate from the norm. Like, if you think differently against what the collective thinks, that's it. You're almost ruined, and in some cases you are ruined. But yeah, that's just a side thought.
No, it's a brilliant thought, and it was sort of the first video I found from Ranting Minority was sort of a deep dive, nuanced take on all the people applauding Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I was talking about how Kamala Harris is being like celebrated in some circles, hated in other circles, hated more in different circles. And it was like conflicting for me because I was happy to see a woman vice president. Don't get me wrong, I really was, but it's just like, could it have been anyone else? Like literally anyone else? Like we've been protesting all like summer about issues that Kamala Harris has been adding to
about reforming the police, right? Like, and
so it's like I mean, I'm happy we have a Black woman vice president. That's like a huge milestone. I believe representation matters to a certain point, but I feel like once we like start paying too much into like the optics of it all, we stop criticizing. And it sort of just becomes this thing where we should just be thankful to have Joe in office. And like, I was afraid this would happen. Like before the election, everyone was like, let's push Joe left. Let's push Joe left. But now when I see people criticize Joe, it's like a dogfight.
Yeah. I saw that video and I pretty much agreed with everything that you said. I, you know, as a British person, you know, watching US politics.
It's quite a show.
Yeah, it is, but don't worry, ours isn't any better. Like, it's a shame and disgrace here too. But I think the thing is why I keep an eye so heavily on American politics is because it affects us. You know, it affects the UK, full stop. I mean, it affects the world, but I mean, it really affects us just because of our relationship, you know. But I think that it's just such a good point. Like, Kamala Harris, like, I think that people, and Joe Biden is as well, actually, like, he doesn't get off scot-free, but
yeah, I think it's
the selective, yeah, the selective, I guess, I don't even know what to call it. The way all the things they've done in the past, particularly to Black people and brown people, which one of the things that irritated me the most about the presidential race was the emphasis on black vice president, black VP, black. Where? And if that's the case, please tell me what exactly what she did for the Black community up until all of a sudden she claimed her Blackness. That's the first thing as well, because prior to that, I mean, she's biracial, and I know her mum is Indian and is who she's closest with. She's always identified as a brown, you know, Indian woman, and all of a sudden she was Black. You know, yeah. It was literally used for marketing, and everybody ate it up. And then also it was the perfect time to use it for marketing because Trump had just made such a shit show. Like, it was so terrible. It needed to be anyone but him. And I remember saying to some American friends, just like, I really feel sorry for you guys, because it really is a case of lesser evil. But the thing is, they're both evil. If we're being fair, you know, if we're looking at sort of like historically, yeah. But it's just a shitty situation to be in. Who do you pick out of one who's saying, don't worry, I've changed and I see everything you're saying and blah blah blah, two people, because it wasn't just the potential president. It was the VP as well that had done particularly harmful things to the Black unit, the Black family unit, and just Black people in general. Like, I don't know, this is the thing about politics that's so icky, you know. It just feels, you feel dirty, you feel like you've entered into some kind of dirty game, and that's what people are. We're just we're there to be used basically and abused, and when it's necessary, we're for you. You know, I care about black rights and Black this and Black that. I mean, even the really ignorant thing that Kamala said about, like, she said something about smoking weed or something. Oh, I'm Jamaican, like half my family's Jamaican or something. Like, how many Jamaicans talk about how harmful that stereotype is? I mean, from what I know, it's even illegal to smoke weed in Jamaica anyway. Like, and also, it's Rastafarianism that particularly or specifically kind of uses marijuana as part of their religion and their beliefs. So to tar Jamaicans, you being one, you know, you can't possibly be that in touch with your family if you think that that's appropriate. Like, it's these little things, these type of games that play on, you know, on people who are desperate for something new, desperate for change. So I don't know.
Who are supposed to be representing the Black community, who are pushing the anti-Black narrative. Like, I remember Obama saying something about fatherless homes. I was like, dude,
that old stereotype, yeah.
You come from a fatherless home, quote, quote. Like, what is this? Like,
T1J just did a brilliant breakdown of statistically how that's quite misrepresentative. And often I think it's that they're less likely to be married because weddings are expensive. And that's being, you know, misconstrued by analysts as all these fatherless children.
Yeah, I believe I saw his study and looked at it before that video. But if I'm not mistaken, basically when they use marriage and housing as like what counts as a 2-parent household, and they just kind of full stop there. Like, didn't see, okay, maybe there's someone living here who isn't like, you know, government. Doesn't have the government confirming they're living here. Maybe there's someone who just doesn't live here, but like visits his kid every once in a while. And that wasn't really what they were trying to prove. It was just another way to frame a invisible issue and frame it as if, you know, America has this tendency to throw the plight of the Black community on themselves. And even if you examine a problem for literally less than maybe 5 minutes, you can say, okay, this came from maybe some type of socioeconomic thing, but how did that happen? Like, oh, it's America. It always comes back to them at the end of the day, but they always try to throw it back on the Black people. Like, you guys need to get your crime rate better. I'm like, how do you? That one really irritates me out of all.
Yeah, especially with the background of the war on drugs, right, and how it was used to arrest people for any excuse.
Exactly. Like, I feel like it's so weird, like telling us to just stop committing crime. I'm like, I don't know every Black person, for one. And I don't really think people are like committing crime because they like crime.
Exactly.
Like, most people are doing this because they really don't have many other options. You never really hear about a rich man committing an armed robbery.
Well, if you steal $1 million from a bank, your accountants talk to the government's accountants and sort it out. If you steal 10,000, then it's a different type of crime. You go to a different type of prison, right?
It's over surveillance as well, because actually a lot of white people, including businessmen and so on and so forth, commit crime all the time. Like in the UK, you know, we get, like, I was actually literally talking to someone about this the other day. The idea, like, they didn't mean to. You know, when someone says something and you just like, oh, I know what you meant,
but it's a mistake.
It's just, you know, like, and they were basically saying that, you know, how many Black people do you know that, you know, I don't know many Black people that don't smoke weed. I was like, so who are the Black people that, you know, this is a white person. I was like, so who are the Black people that you know that don't smoke weed? And obviously I listed off a whole bunch of, you know, people that we mutually knew that were Black that don't smoke weed. But then I had to point out the number of white folk that do smoke weed or do some other drug, which was all of them, like literally all of them. So if you, in the UK, Black and brown people are disproportionately stopped and searched. Black people in particular, let's just call a spade, are disproportionately stopped. Now, mostly like cocaine, for example, it is, regardless of where you go, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but in the UK and the US, it's a rich person's drug, as they always say, it's a rich man's drug.
Except for crack, which is chemically the same thing, but carries a different sentence, policed differently. Yeah.
Exactly. And then something like crack is mainly associated with Black folk, when actually, like, again, the numbers don't support that. It's mainly white people that tend to use crack.
And the war on drugs is the backdrop to all of this. Like, I mean,
it is
a lot of the, like, London, you know, the gangs and the money from the drugs. You're like, right, so you have in London these two groups, right? Like, rich white bankers buying the drugs,
And
and then some
right.
people who are selling them the drugs. And who are you choosing to police? Like,
But
who are you arresting?
But even
doing the crime there? Like, it's been
who's even
decided because of
supplying the
class.
drugs? Like the people that are supplying the drugs tend to be white people that are supplying the drugs to youngers, as you know, you'd say, or like just guys. You tend to be black guys, not even just black guys. I know. Again, it's about the optics, and it's about this idea that it's only associated with this race and that race, when you have to look at, let's start from the top.
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then the police have that misconception, so they're more likely to stop and search. And if I was stopped and searched, like, something would have been found on me many a time, but it doesn't happen very often. Not with this white skin and not with this posh accent. I get away with it. So yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, no matter what, blackness itself to institutions, teachers, police, healthcare, like professionals, is, you're guilty already. You must be this because you're black. You must be a criminal because you're black. You must be lying about your pain because you're black. You must be lying about I don't know, you're just not going to be good enough to understand this, so let me give you this type of work instead. Like, it's automatic. And it's, if more white people were stopped, for example, and you know, anyway, if more white people were stopped and searched, the numbers would be very, very different. And this is the sad thing. It's not that white people are committing less crimes. They're just not being checked. That's it. That's all. That's the only difference. Like, you're literally guilty by having the skin color, like just being black, and that's it. It's as simple as that. Like, it doesn't matter how educated I am, and I'm bloody educated. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, like in whatever subject or area, which I am also. I will still be treated in a certain way. Now, the thing with me is my patience. Like, sometimes I'll be like, right, I'll play the game. And at other times I will cuss you for your life. Don't try me. But still, I know that if I choose to stand up for myself, essentially, I'm putting my life at risk. Like, so I don't know, like, it goes so deep. Like, you know,
that's really the most frustrating part, like wanting to like speak and stand up for yourself, but the minute you do, you're perceived as the angry ex, or you're outrageous or rowdy, even if like your outrageous or rowdiness, so to speak, is completely justified. It's just like in like Western culture, is like blackness, no matter like what the circumstance, has always like been framed and somehow is their own fault. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like this past summer with the protests and things, the way people talk about like rioting and things, just, this is like not my first, I was alive for Trayvon Martin protest, but first time like paying attention, because I'm young, obviously, paying attention to like protests. And I was like, I don't know if it's wrong that I'm not very upset about the looting, and I don't know, you know, how am I supposed to like gripe with that? Like, I really don't know. I know why Fox 10 is talking shit about the looting, but I really just didn't get why people in general like were upset about it. It was just one of those things where I was just like, I mean, I get that we're upset that something got destroyed, but at the same time, I feel like the more we talk about this, the less like attention we're paying to like what caused all of this.
Exactly.
Well,
and I agree. Who cares? I don't care if they're looting. I don't give a shit. I give 0 Fs. I don't care. Like, it's just a distraction from the fact that there's a reason why people are out there in the first place. And again, there was a very small portion of people that were going out and looting. But even then, I just don't care. Like, oh, what was it? I had a friend, like, literally, I blocked them. I cussed them out and I blocked them off everything, because I just didn't, at that time, there was already the Rona out, you know, and then there was the pain of having to see another Black person murdered. But this was so, you know, George Floyd was on a different level of traumatized. And the thing is, I had just been dealing with seeing the Ahmaud Arbery case, which I've been following, like, you know, like I've been watching all the court cases and everything, because it just, shook me to my core. And I understand that there's a different light that's been shown on Ahmad's case because it wasn't police brutality, but to me, in a sense, it kind of was, because these are ex-police, like that murdered him, basically. And seeing George Floyd, that trauma, I mean, I know it was felt worldwide. I know white people felt it as well. I know other races felt it as well. But when you are a Black person,
and you see this constantly.
Exactly. You know, personally, you know, close friends, even just walking down the street, like, you know, where I am, Peckham is, you can't, I guess it's like, it's a rough area. Well, it's changed a lot now, gentrification ain't. But it's changed a lot. Like it used to be, I guess, one is ends in it, we call it ends. So it's like basically the hood, like if equivalent in the US. And it was just commonplace to see the police stopping some Black boy and manhandling them, and you're screaming, you know, get off them, you know, leave them alone. Like, because I think there's a misunderstanding with a lot, and it's not, I think it's just genuine ignorance. It's not knowing, it's just not being sort of informed, or just having enough sort of like stuff out there. But there is this belief that racism is nicer or kinder or different in the UK. Not the case. It's just not the case. Like when I was in secondary school, which was in the early 2000s, it was, there was it like the NF, like, so National Front, which is
sort of like our Proud Boys.
Yeah. They would be doing marches. I went to school, before I moved to the Brit school, I went to secondary school at Alwyn Girls' School, which I think they've changed their name now, which was in Bermondsey. Bermondsey is a notoriously, or was, I don't know how it is now, but a notoriously racist area. That's where a lot of NF Millwall football football club, which was notorious for being a racist club. So it wasn't safe. You know, there was a lot of times we would have to get escorted home. They would have their marches. Every Black History Month, they would come and egg and attack Black teachers. They would come and attack Black students. Like, you know, it wasn't, so, you know, it's just this idea that these things didn't happen. Being called all types of N-words and everything else, like that's just standard procedure. I think the problem is they believe, a lot of white people in Britain believe they're not, you know, believe they're nicer than the Americans.
Yeah, well, that's the narrative, isn't it? Like, oh, yeah. America, they've got such racial problems. Bless them.
But never forget that the US had slavery and the UK had colonialism. Like, this is where it started, okay? Like, this is where but in sort of true British fashion, they didn't do their dirty work here. You know, like they started in the Caribbean, they went all over Africa. Well,
it's a multinational corporation, right? Like,
exactly. So, you know, there's just so many layers to it. So I can't even remember I was going with this, but yeah, it's sorry, go on.
I was saying you were speaking about a friend you once had.
Right, that's it. Thank you. So a friend of mine, right in the thick of the whole George Floyd stuff and taking the knee, like you know, I can't breathe, which I hate. I feel like it's like you're internalizing something very negative. Words have power, and so on and so forth. But I get it. You know, I get it. Like, and I think everyone's protest should be their own, and no one should tell them how to do it. But me personally, it didn't make sense to me. Like, this was how he was murdered. So you're getting down on your knees in protest, like, you know, like, but I get, again, symbolism and stuff like that, which again, I take very seriously too. Symbolism, you know, the words that you say, like putting words to power, all of that stuff is very dangerous. So to keep repeating, I can't breathe, to be getting on your knees in the way that he was murdered, like lynched in broad day, like, you know, like but this idiot like decided to like posted like a bunch of stuff like saying pretty much that slavery was a choice, that type of idea, like, you know, no one can make you a slave if you don't allow them to be.
That's a blockable offense, Chief.
These are the
worse.
same people, mind you, that will tell you shouldn't be being too rowdy or violent at a protest. Same group.
Exactly. And actually he was doing the same. He was sharing all this stuff about like looting is what is this? What does this say? You know what? So I allowed the whole looting is what, you know, was, and I ended up doing the sort of started getting really angry, like doing passive aggressive, because again, angry black woman, I have to be careful around, you know, these spaces. I have to be careful how I react to disrespect and racism. I basically saying I really don't give two shits about whether or not they're looting. Focus on the issue. Focus on what's happening. Focus on what has caused all of this to happen in the first place, not the few businesses.
And there was an over-focus on businesses. And in England, it was even pettier. It was like a couple of statues of famous slavers. And at some point, there's all these people like, won't someone think of the statues? And you're like, I think you're missing the point here.
It's history or whatever. I'm like, that's such a weird argument.
Then put it in a museum. But I get why people don't want to have a slave owner in their local park. Do you not get that?
Yeah.
Do you not? No?
Oh, Rosario.
She
must have dropped out.
Oh.
There you go.
Sorry, don't know what happened.
It's all right. How long were you talking to yourself there for? You're on a roll, unfortunately.
Oh no!
So
shit!
good.
Like I don't know. Where did I get?
We lost you that you don't give a shit about businesses, right?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Cool. So yeah, I don't give a shit about the businesses. It's just an excuse, you know, that they're using to ignore the issue. Basically, it's just that, you know, you're fighting for these big companies and stuff who have insurance and all this other stuff. Shut up, basically.
Did you have people talking about the looting in your area as well?
What, in the UK, or were the British press talking about the looting in America? So, like say, like in England, it was, it just became statue-based hysteria, right? And it's any excuse they could find to get upset about. First, they were talking about, but what about COVID? I thought the left cared about staying inside in COVID, because at the time, the right was still arguing that we shouldn't have a lockdown, right? And so that became, what about the lockdown for that protest then? Like, oh, for God's sake.
No, now you want a lockdown.
Yeah, that was the argument, right?
Oh, sorry, my internet connection keeps dying. I really honestly don't. I swear, it's always fine. It's always fine.
It's the feds. They're shutting us down, I'm telling you.
No, sometimes like I get super paranoid. I'm like, who's it?
Every time we get real political, they're like,
no, it's fine. Yeah, no. So so he messages me and he says that you know, he's not getting down his knees or whatever, and I was like, okay, so you've gone out of your way to message your one black friend to tell them during a very traumatizing time, like, please understand, we were not just sitting there like, oh, this is sad. We were crying with them. We were heartbroken. We were literally, like, I got to a point where I couldn't close. I was already traumatized by Ahmaud Arbery. Like, I remember just falling apart and just saying, I wish I didn't watch that. I wish I didn't see it. Because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And it was so heartbreaking. It was so traumatizing. And it took me a long time to stop seeing his body drop to the ground. It took so long. And I remember, like, as I'd closed my, it was really bad. Like I didn't react well to it. Like I was pretty messed up. And I'm one of those lay masters who says that they're an empath and everything else. Like, so I felt everything was overwhelming. And as most Black people feel the pressure to speak up, because no one, you know, these things are happening because we're constantly and consistently put down, disrespected, you know, harmed, and no one really bats an eyelid. So it always felt like we have to fight for it, we have to do it, you know. And I felt like I had to keep going, I had to keep sharing, I had to keep educating, I had to keep letting my because I've got a mixture of friends from all different races, and I felt like please understand how damaging and hurtful and harmful. And I even went and started sharing like a lot of personal things. I'm sure we'll talk about it over this conversation, but a lot of really heartbreaking things happened with a lot of friendships with white people that I had, people that I loved dearly, years of friendship that I loved dearly. And every time I would eventually get reduced to my race and the N-word, and like and then always faced with, do I react? Can I punch them in the face? Like, can I react? Like, and I can't, because immediately they're intimidated, they're scared of me, I'm scary, you know, I'm terrified, like what's she gonna do? But it's okay to say all these things to me. You don't know what the associations and everything that I've gone through my entire life, having to hear this all the time. Yeah, it's funny how I don't have any mistake calling you any slurs, you know, like it doesn't even come to mind. Like but anyway, my point is I was really frustrated. I was pissed off. Like, you know, you're telling me that you ain't getting on your knees. I didn't ask you to get on your knees. When did I ask you to get on your knees? In fact, furthermore, I didn't even agree with it myself. That was not, to me, the right type of, not the right type, but I didn't like the whole getting on your knees thing. You know, I just, no. So I was like, that's it. It's actually so, I started getting so angry, like I was breathless. Like when something's physical, when you're having a physical reaction to someone deliberately going out of their way to center themselves, when someone's just been murdered in broad daylight. We had to watch a 10-minute video of this guy being murdered. You're screaming, saying, someone stop them. You know, like, we will never get over that. We will never, ever get over that. Even if white people move on, or other races move on, we will remember that. Like, that will be stuck in our heads forever. Ahmaud Arbery is stuck in my head forever. Breonna Taylor is stuck in my head forever. Shamima Begum, all the people, we've got America, then we've got the UK. We've got Black people in the UK being murdered when they're you know, with the police, when incarcerated. We have it in Africa, many different parts of Africa, which I know it differs slightly because it's police brutality rather than racially charged police brutality. But we're still seeing our brothers and sisters die. Like, one of us goes, that hurts the collective. So yeah, I had to cut a lot of people. I had to shut. I was like, no more. Stop making excuses for people. Stop doing it. Because you don't want to be seen as angry, or you don't want to be, it doesn't matter though, they still disrespect you. So it doesn't matter. So,
yeah, I had some really issues in my friend groups. It was right around the summer where this conversation became like, I don't really understand like the rioting thing. And I'll be honest, at the time, I didn't really have like a concrete argument for it either, but it was just one of those conversations where we kind of started to go through like the options, and I was like, well, I mean, I get that we're supposed to be like peaceful or whatever, and like most of them have been. And then the conversation becomes, you know, well, haven't, you know, peaceful protests, you know, worked in the past and during like civil rights? And I'm like, you know, it made me realize a lot of like education for like Black history starts and ends at slavery, or starts at slavery and ends at like MLK. And it, like, for a moment, I didn't really know what it was, but like, it was like during the conversations I had, I started to realize why MLK was so, like, you know, so like championed during this time, and why he's like the main one we're like shown and like shoved down our throats.
Quoted every time.
Every time.
Killed him. You still killed him.
And that was always my response. I was like, I mean, I get you completely. And like, MLK, you know, carried guns, sorry, so he wasn't peaceful like you think he is, but I'm like, they still murdered him. So
and have you seen that old cartoon of him standing in front of a burnt out city, and the reporter being like, there's so many peaceful protests, how's it going? And so the point is, like, now in hindsight, they're like, oh, look, he was peaceful. But at the time, it was the same playbook. They accused his followers of not being peaceful enough and pushing too much and not saying the right thing, right?
Yeah, like this whole summer just was a political like shit show for me, honestly. Like, I started to lose a lot of hope in American like politics in general. And I don't know like if I'll ever really gain hope back, but I really just got really frustrated how like the only person that was quoted was the one guy that was murdered, even though he was.
And
like,
it was a type of gaslighting. It felt every single time they would be like, but you know, remember what Martin Luther King, shut up about Martin Luther King. Like, honestly, shut up about Martin Luther King. Please stop using this guy and sullying his legacy, because yes, he was about peaceful protest and I guess doing it the nice way. I remember I studied for 2 years out of uni. I studied African American culture and politics. It was the only thing that I could find at university that dealt with Black history of any kind. We're only finally really talking about Black British history. But it was, I remember just, it was hard. I remember looking around and it, you know, lectures was filled with only white people. I was the only Black person. And the lecturer was also white. Yeah, and you're sitting there and you're like,
I have to speak.
Are you guys feeling this like I, you know, I didn't know who, I couldn't really speak. Actually, my one of my closest friends, we both did this, we went to do the subject together. She was she's white. And she is one of those people who, although I hate the term ally, she's someone that I could say to some degree is an ally. I mean, people are only allies up until they're faced with having to, you know, check themselves. But you know, she's someone that I would say, you know, is definitely an ally. And she would get so angry, so upset. She was always crying, and I was there trying to keep it together every time. You know, when you're looking at old textbooks, like really old literature that's talking about the mongrelization, you know, I remember I'll never forget seeing, you know, a literary genius like describing Black folk as a mongrelization. Like, I'd never even seen that word, but I didn't know it was a word. Like, and I remember just looking around and feeling so alone, like most cases, you know, that I found throughout my life. And I just knew there's no one I could speak to about it. You know, there's no one that's going to feel it in the same way. They'll be like, oh, this is so sad, but they won't feel it in the same way. You know, they're lucky that they can be divorced from it, whereas I couldn't. But I remember getting so angry. And at one point I was looking around, I was like, don't get like that. I started to think like, white people, I can't just, you know, I'm looking around, I'm like, oh my God, like I started to freak out. I was like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by white people. I don't know if they actually like me. I don't know if they're actually racist or not. Like, at least with the KKK.
I deal with that a lot in university, being the only Black, oh my God, I'm an English major. I'm the only Black man in class. And we were talking about like the method of Black rapists in one of our classes, which is like this like narrative that was pushed like in early American, kind of through civil rights, about the, you know, rapist Black man who's going to attack all the white women. We need to protect them by lynching them all from trees. And I just kind of looked around the room. I'm like, oh my God, if they literally just lied to a policeman, I could die right now. Yeah. Like, it's wild to think about.
It's scary. It's, you know, you're not even really like, the default for Black people is strength. That's what everyone says, and it's a way to negate our pain. You know, if you say that, if they say that we're strong, then it means that all the shitty things that they do to us, oh, they can take it. You know, if you say someone is strong, then it means that you don't have to check yourself when you make them feel less than. And especially, you know, the strong Black woman. You know, it's always the strong Black woman. Yet there's such high cases of mental health issues within the Black community as a whole, but also with, you know, Black women. And please, like, you know, I always worry a bit when I'm talking about mental health with regard to like women, men, or whatever. Like, I am fully aware of the disproportionate number of men that commit suicide, and I genuinely care about it. I don't feel like, oh, whatever, women are that, like, I'm not like that. Like, I'm not of that mind. I know quite a few people, particularly feminist friends of mine, who believe that, well, I don't care, you know, men are trash, blah, blah, blah. I do care. It worries me. It worries me a lot, especially because I have to protect their personal business, someone very close, you know, in my family that is going through severe mental health issues, you know, and the way the system has treated them. So I think that Black women are constantly told that they're a strong Black woman, and yeah, we are strong, yes. I think we're resilient, actually. We're resilient because, you know, if you're used to being treated a certain way, you tend to build a hard shell, you know, you tend to get, it still affects you, but you find better ways of kind of dealing with it, because no one's coming to protect you. Like, no one's coming to your aid because you're fine. You know, you're always fine. Like, no one wants to step in, you know, for Black women, but it's always, oh, you're so strong. I get it with all of my white female friends. Oh, you're so strong. I wish I was as strong as you. Really? Really? You think I'm strong? No, it's just because it's not safe for me to show you my vulnerability. That's all it is. I'm probably just as vulnerable as you are, but it doesn't serve me anything to show that vulnerability. Because no one cares. I can cry and people will still look at me and be like, well, you know, why are you crying? You know, it's not the same way it's handled if, you know, a white woman cries, for instance. Like, if she's crying, it's like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, you know, like, they can't deal with that much, you know, they're fragile, which they themselves are trying to fight against, you know, but so it's just another way that we're treated badly, you know. It's these compliments that are just ways to, I mean, that was kind of like the thought pattern between enslaving Black people in the first place. You know, they're treated like cattle, treated like animals because they can take it. They're not human, you know, they're like some kind of human-like creature, you know, like, and it's the same thing today. Like, it's just people really believe they're not like that because we're not literally in chains. Well, I mean, the whole prison system, both in the UK, the US, all over the world, is a form of modern day slavery.
Literal slavery. When we still kind of slave away for low wages. It's wage slavery nowadays too.
Yep.
Yeah, or if you're in prison, you're working for some corporation, being paid a lot less than minimum wage. Right?
Getting paid literally quarters on the hour to put out wildfires.
Yep.
Yeah. So sort of as a white person, I've been hearing a lot less of everything you just described. It's really good to listen to, but I am familiar with a lot of the detractors, the devil's advocates, the people, well, what about this? And asking all these weird questions. And Sam Harris, I think, is the most obvious example of someone that's probably accepted by the mainstream, but has had on some really toxic guests and still pretends he's Hitch 2.0.
You know, it's really sad because I was like really into Sam Harris at one point. And this is like
he got me into podcasting, man.
I was more into like his atheist stuff, and then I heard, oh, he talks about politics too, and I was just like, oh my God. I was like,
yeah, it's the same theology stuff. It's pseudo intellectual stuff, but when you talk about something that you do any research into, you're like, oh my God, Sam, like you couldn't be talking out of your ass harder.
Right. Like, I saw Shapiro, and I was honestly convinced he was like a leftist accent. Oh, this guy's a leftist. He just
like a lot of grifters. He describes himself as leftist, but he's open-minded, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's so disappointing seeing him talk about like white privilege and stuff. It's like, man. Like,
did you see the Ezra Klein Sam Harris debate?
I did not. I heard.
I can't recommend it enough. And for me, it just shattered the glass because Ezra Klein, very good journalist, speaks very clearly, and he just dropped a few things because Sam had been doing this for 5+ years, going through that there's just a problem with Black culture and they need to comply with the police and all these horrible shit takes that. Again, if you don't look, if you spend less than 10 minutes looking into, you're like, oh yeah, it sounds like he has a point there, maybe. But Ezra Klein's just like, you know, the average Black household where everyone went to university earns less than the average white household when no one did. How is that not a structural problem? And Sam had nothing for it. He's just, well, I guess it's the rap music, yeah.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that one.
Oh, definitely watch that.
So listening into all this, like, obviously moving, But, you know, as I imagine, probably the majority of my audience are white. I have no idea to know. But the question is raised, like, how do we be a good, the word you hate, ally? Like, because I was listening and, you know, there's not much for me to say, right? Or is that the answer? Do I just shut the fuck up and listen?
What I really wish more white people would do would be like maybe engage with more race theory and literature beyond what was taught to you in American education. Because to be frank, what American education teaches you about racism and, you know, race and the history of all of it in America is bullshit.
Yep.
Like complete and utter bullshit. And this
ended in 1972, right?
Basically, it's like it's not meant for you to be understanding to like what are your current system issues, what's like how do we get here. So I think I would really appreciate if people like, you know, just write a little more race theory, you know, maybe pick up some Fanon every once in a while. I realize asking people to read a book is really a terrible way to get people to like move over to your cause, but at the same time, I feel like, you know, reading is beneficial for understanding, you know, the basics of it all. So,
it seems a low bar, especially if you're going to spout off an opinion loudly on social media and start doubting an entire movement, right? Like if you're going to come out on Facebook and mention your one black friend and be like, here's my hot take on the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, maybe you might want to read one book there, Chief. Just slow down your roll.
We won't even push you that an audiobook. Try that, you know, like, exactly. And the thing is, I don't even judge. I know some people don't like to read. That's actually,
I get that.
I don't judge you for that. Like, that's fine. But there are so many different ways today that you can learn. In fact, you can even go and watch documentaries. Just go and learn, for God's sake. It's not that hard.
But on that same token, I think if you are going to be like, you know, doing the activism or trying to fight various causes, I think is also important for you to educate yourself, because not everyone's going to want to read a book. You may need to get someone there through a conversation first, and not everyone's going to be pulled away from a conversation. I'll admit that. I've had many arguments with people's grandmas in the Facebook comment section and got nowhere. But I've also, you know, showed some people some new things they didn't know who, you know, may have came over a little more to the left. So I think educating yourself on these things is really, really important. Listening to your black friends and not just the ones who you think will agree with you. Really important.
I have a slightly I'm generally an optimistic person, but I feel like the term ally in itself, I just think it just makes me cringe. Like, honestly, I hate it so much because one, like, what does it actually really say? Like, what does it actually really mean? That's the first thing. It means loads of different things to loads of different people. Like, black people don't all think the same. We're not all the same. We don't have all the same. We're not from the same background.
There's not one team I can sign up
exactly.
for. Right?
And what, you know, if someone wants to say, what would I see as someone being an ally? Well, I would say, like, because of the things, I find it hard to believe there is such a thing, just because through personal experience, there are many white people in my life that I consider to be really important, really close friends, that I loved so much. And eventually they show a side that I'm like, oh, okay. You know, like I'm a black person that happens to despise the use of the N-word. I don't like it. I don't use it. But I also don't like it. If black people want to use it, that's up to them. Like, I'm never going to try and police their form of expression. Although I think it's a bit weird when UK heads use it. I mean, but anyway, like, it happens, and that's fine. But there's no one around me that could ever think that, oh, but we're friends, so I'm just saying it as in, what's up, my N-word? Like, they know that won't fly with me. Like, I don't like it. There's not anybody that knows me that doesn't know that I hate it. It will always mean what it means to me. It will always have the...
Can I make a confession here? You don't have to absolve me of my skills, my sins, right? This isn't Catholic confession. I'm not automatically forgiven. But I feel now's a good time to make a confession. So I had an African-American friend at university. I learned a lot talking to him because he was nearly victim to the 3 strikes thing. Like the reason he was studying in the UK was because he had 2 strikes against him. And then his grandma had enough money, and I think even for a foreign student, it's cheaper to study in the UK than it was in the States. So anyway, he was there. He was super cool. And he was battle rapping with some other friend one day, and he referred to me as his N-word Chris. And it's got to be one of the highlights of my life. I can't just, to this day, fills my heart with warmth. And I just had to confess that. I'm sorry. That's the closest I've come to.
But you know, there's that I can you know, I can see that. I can totally get that, and don't worry, like it's cool. Like like I thought you were going to say you used the N-word.
Oh no, yeah, this podcast would have taken a different turn had that been my confession.
But like I don't have I basically, like, you know, my best friend, actual best friend, you know, had said it, but the worst thing, it wasn't even in a nice way. Like, it wasn't in a, you know, like type of way. It was a proper, like, you know, it was just really bizarre. Like, it was the weirdest moment. And I remember, like, just thinking, huh? Yeah, like, it was just.
Was that just like verbal Tourette's? Like, you know, when you'd like bump into a table and you're like, oh shit, no,
Well, no, it was actually
like a brain fart moment.
It was actually my leaving drinks from my previous job before the last job before I finally was writing. You know, I was a full-time journalist, and there was one of my friends or colleagues' boyfriend came to the pub, and he came with his best friend who happened to be Black. Now, at this point, I had lived in Scotland for, I think, 7 years, maybe 8 years. Like, I was always the token Black. Like, there was barely any Black folk around. Like, it was just, you know, it makes a difference, okay? Like, I swear it really does. Like, and I was just like, oh my God! Oh my God! Like, I was just like, oh my God! And I may have gone top, like, you know.
I get it. Yeah, we've all been like, you know, when I was in Korea, I hadn't seen a white person in 2 weeks, and then I was like, hey.
There you go. Like, I was just so happy to see. I was just like, oh my, and I kept saying, you see this Black and Shine? Like, I kept putting my arm against his arm, going, you see Black and Shine, Black and Shine. You know, I was just like, oh, it's so good to, like, we immediately just glued to each other because it was just so nice, because he felt the same way. It was like, oh my God, another Black person. And and so he when he was ended up leaving and stuff, I you know, I said goodbye and everything, and then I came back to sit at the table with my 3, I'd say, best friends, not anymore, but I went back to sit with them, and she turns to like one of my friends, like, and is like, yeah, whatever, like, basically mimicking me being like, oh, you know, Black and Shine, Black, like oh, like, Black is Black.
If they went to like an HBCU for a day, they would be the exact same way. Like, I've seen white people like get visibly uncomfortable when they're like the only white person in the room. And I've heard them like speak about being uncomfortable. I'm like,
welcome to my world.
Welcome to my
world. I go to a PWI and I'm just like, that must be really hard for you. That must be super fucking hard for you.
But can you imagine though? It's like, when my excitement was not in any way saying that it wasn't, I didn't mean anything bad to the white folk. I didn't mean that I don't like you guys, or, you know, it's just, it was nothing like that. It was just genuine. I was so happy. Like, I for my entire professional career, like, particularly in Scotland, you know, working in Aberdeen, there was so many microaggressions. It was non-stop. And I always had to keep it in, because angry Black woman. In fact, there was one time that I reacted very early on, and this is why I never did. This is how they make you fall in line. And And I ended up getting, I mean, she started crying, she ran off. Funnily enough, that she actually messaged me like about last year, like after the whole, you know, when white people realized racism exists.
Oh yeah, apparently this was a huge thing, right? Like everyone was messaging their one black friend and being like, okay.
But she actually apologized.
Racism
She apologized for that. But I don't even think, I personally didn't even think, although she said something, she's from Louisiana as well. Like, so she said, there's some really ignorant things she said over the years. And I just felt like, listen, you're from Louisiana. That does not look good. Okay. That already doesn't look good. But she would say colored and things like that. Who doesn't know that you don't call anyway.
Colored.
Yeah. Colored. Like, I mean, and this is, we're talking about like what? A few years ago. Like, it wasn't like years ago. Like, in fact, our generation can't even come out with that and say, oh, you know, when we were younger, it was past that. We were way past that time. So everyone knows colored is inappropriate.
But there's a difference between America and the UK, right? Like
in America, like color phased out like with after the civil rights, I believe.
I don't mean with terms color, but with the way people of color refer to themselves, right?
It's even worse, I would say, in America. Like in the US, like, I mean, when things were literally, it was said colored or whites, you know, things like that. Like, it was just, I think some white people get confused because of the NAACP and stuff like that. They think they're like, oh, but they use colored in that sense, so that they think that sometimes you'll hear black folks say Negro or colored, and so they kind of get confused. But it's just one of those things where you just don't say it. Like, in fact, one of my bestest friends, I mean, like from school, like really young, like he in a group chat with all of, like, we were a mixed group of like all races, whites, white Irish, British, Jamaican, Nigerian, Venezuelan. We were a mix of like everything, like in our friendship group. And in this group chat, he said colored people, and we were like, what was it? Like, what? Like, and he really genuinely didn't know. Like, he was like, I thought black is bad. I was like, how can you know us all for this long and you think colored is acceptable? Like, he genuinely didn't know. And I think sometimes there are people that don't know. I understand. I can't explain it because I will never understand it. But they genuinely, it seems to happen a lot. I've been called colored several times in my life, several times. And I'll be like, and they'll say usually the same thing, that I didn't know that colored was, I thought black was offensive. I was like, no, black's fine. Okay. You know, I mean, you know, it could be better, but that's fine. Like, you know, let's just, that's cool.
That's my question though. Is it the same in the US and the UK for which terms are fine and which terms aren't?
I know color is bad in the US. Usually black is fine. But what I've noticed lately is, I noticed it's like small, but like in a lot of studies and like when we talk about like black people academically, they'll refer to them as blacks. And
I don't like that either.
It just sounds weird, you know? Like,
it's like the difference between a Chinese man and like, Chinaman, one word, right? Like,
yeah, it's like blacks. It's like
blacks or Jews or people? Like, it just sounds bad. Like,
the blacks doesn't rest easy coming off my tongue. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I don't like the way blacks sounding. I think it just really depends on like the context you use. Just say black people, like that sounds great to me.
I agree. Black people. I hate when people say blacks or, you know, black people.
So that, I mean, and that was one of the main questions here is like, is it then that white people, the whites, have to tread on eggshells, or is there really
I think they
very simple things they can do?
They
do. Or summer of last year, was it time to be careful with opinions and listen?
That was definitely time to be a little more quiet. But I think like there's not like a walking on eggshells, so to speak, but I think a lot of people don't realize they are, in a sense, because most white people don't have a black friend, like in America.
So they're like, oh, I have to tread on eggshells, and you're like, no, you're a bull in a china shop right now.
It's like they don't realize that they have to like watch what they say because they've just lived in this colorblind sense to where they never like have to consider what's offensive to someone who doesn't look like them. You know, they're not used to being around black people or having like, you know, learn new things about what's offensive and all, because they just don't have many black friends. Like, it's really unfortunate. It's like America is so segregated to the point where it's really hard to like, you know, build this type of solidarity, because cities are segregated, schooling is segregated, colleges are like kind of segregated. It's hard to like, you know, educate yourself or, you know, get to know Black people when you're kind of systemically kept away from those areas. So I don't think you have to walk on eggshells per se. I think it's like a unintentional thing that they have to do because just the society like they are raised in. And even vice versa. I think one thing that I found out, like I had to walk on eggshells, so to speak, coming to a PWI when I kind of had to
sorry, what's the PWI?
Predominantly white institution, university.
Thank you.
But I had to realize I had to sort of adjust my way of speaking and my way of like navigating things when I came to PWI, because I started to realize when I talked in more of my slang voice or ABE, it was a lot harder to get like points across because they just did not understand. It's really weird. Like, God. Rosario, do you find yourself having to code switch in Scotland, or is that less of an issue there?
Always. I'm code switching right now. Like, I mean, if I was in Peckham, I'd sound like a South Londoner. Like, but I've had to find ways to speak in a way that doesn't, I hate to say it, but it's intimidate. That's what I always got. It's it's intimidate. Oh, you're so scary, or blah blah blah. So I made a conscious effort to change the way. Also, like, I'm someone that read I read. Like, I love learning stuff, you know. So I've always, like, I'm a writer, so I know how words are supposed to be said. I know how words are supposed to be written. I know about grammar and punctuation and stuff like that. So when sometimes I find a disconnect personally, even when I speak from ends or speak in my southeast London, you know, Peckham voice, I know I'm conscious of the fact that this is like really bad English, or this is really bad, but like, it's just the way we speak. But it's about being comfortable, you know. I'm just not going to allow myself, because to me that's a vulnerability. That's me showing a part of myself. You know, you're seeing me in my rawest like form, and I've had enough experiences to know that I allowed people to get a snapshot of that didn't deserve to get it, because then they wouldn't understand and would associate it with being less than, being not as intelligent. You know, and the fact is, people do, even black people will hear me speak and be like, you sound white. Do you realize what that means? What you're basically saying is intelligence is associated with whiteness. Like, only white people are intelligent, because that's literally what you're saying. Now,
even when I was younger, I thought that way. It was like, because I speak well, quote quote. It is such an odd fight.
It's bizarre. Like, and you know, we carry these type of like negative stereotypes ourselves, and it's like, you know, a well-spoken black person, a well-spoken black woman even, is like, she thinks she's all like, the situations I've ended up in, because people have assumed, they haven't listened to what I said, they've assumed I meant something else because they are insecure for whatever reason, and I don't blame them, from hearing another black person who's well-spoken, when I don't see them as any less intelligent. You know, some of the most intelligent, most inspiring people in like literature that I look up to are either speaking Jamaican patois, or are you know, from Southeast London or East London, or you know, or from some part of you know, the hood in America or something. And I would never, I actually think, again, it's a reflection of my intelligence. No offense, but you know, I've got to think highly of myself. But I think it's a reflection of my own intelligence that I actually am able to understand that it doesn't matter what you sound like. Intelligence should be measured by what you say, what actually comes out of your mouth, like what, you know, what you demonstrate. And so I don't care about the way that you speak. But I do think that a lot of people feel in a certain way. So even some of my friends from Southeast London, like, they tell me I'm really intelligent, and I'm like, no, I'm not as intelligent as you think. And actually, that's a bit of pressure because, you know, I might get things wrong. They tend to look to me for certain things, and I'm not like, I don't have everything right. You know, and also I'm intelligent in certain areas. I don't cover everything.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and so I always try to tell them, please don't judge yourself by the standards that other people set for intelligence. You are intelligent. You just don't speak the way they want you to. But then I myself know that I then play the game, you know, but I've had to. It's actually for my own protection.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I've been wanting to like make a longer format video about like the whole, you know, the price of the code switch, so to speak. There was this movie by it was called Sorry to Bother You, and the guy code switches and it's really exaggerated, and he, you know, talks like an actual white man on a phone, and near the end of the movie I don't want to spoil it, but the whole premise kind of speaks on like the losses you take when code switching and kind of conforming to the white audience. And I didn't really start thinking about it until recently, but I hate having to like pretend to be something else because I'm afraid someone's going to think I'm unintelligent, like you said, because I speak in a certain way. And even like academia, like we recently read something in class where it spoke about how code switching and standards for English are based in arbitrary rules of whiteness. And then I like started one of my papers. I literally started with, "Hey, what's up?" Like, and just kind of made an argument in my paper, like, well, what if I started with "Greetings, reader"? Then how would that have been taken? It would have been like,
yeah, I mean, upper class white is the language of academia, right? I think,
yeah, for sure.
Funnily enough, like of everything that's been said, I think fair enough. I've shut the fuck up and listened. But the one thing I can relate to is that, because I think what often happens with these, because of structural racism, is that class intersects. And I come from a very working class family. I was like the first to go to university in my family. So when I, you know, hang out with my cousins or, you know, go back home, like feel very out of place and am judged and feel the need often to like try and like just tone it down, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just this awkward feeling of never quite belonging. At my boarding school, I was sort of one of the poorer kids. And then now I always feel like I'm, you get treated a certain way. And God, like get a violin out for me. No, I'm not. I'm just saying like that I can completely relate to. And I think that's the overlap that is really interesting and worth diving into, is that I don't know whether I'm at risk of being a class reductionist here. That horrible
and it's
slur.
odd because once you like can like start the code switch, to me, sometimes I have to think, okay, by doing this, am I confirming their belief, so to speak, that, you know, we don't, you know, Black people speak in this sense, but now I am one of the good ones, so to speak, for being the type that can code switch. And it feels like when I do it, I'm just adding to that like unnormalcy of it, to like Black people coming into like professional spaces and being able to speak in AAVE and still be able to like be taken seriously. But by not doing that, I feel like sometimes I'm just adding to the issue by trying to fit this narrative of like professionalism, which I think is really just whiteness, so to speak.
The thing is though, is you'll probably find, just like Chris was saying, there are other people within that space, white, Asian, otherwise, you know, that do the same thing. We all end up having to play a certain part of ourselves in order to fit a certain environment.
The rich man's game, right?
The rich man's game. And classism is not about race. You know, you can have high class Black people, you can have low class Asian people, you can have low class white people. You know, it's you know, it's not necessarily about race. And so there are people who are maybe you know, from a certain class basically, and end up in a higher class, be it through university, like with Chris, like even myself, like going through certain things they end up, they have to play the game. We're all playing the game. In fact, half of the time we think we're imposters anyway. It's like, should I be here? Like, you know,
yeah,
like,
that as well. I feel like I'm lying to people by trying to like play up the way I speak, like, which isn't like a play up I speak this way, but it's
half
so
of adulting. Aren't 8 of 10 people in a room with imposter syndrome, like pretending like we're all just playing this bullshit role, right?
Yeah, like going into interviews and like I know the minute I leave this interview, my voice is going to, you know, drop a few octaves, you know, a little less professionalism, and I hate that. I really hate that. It's caused like this identity thing for me. Truly, it's like I don't really know what my voice sounds like truly once I spend so much time in a certain space code switching. You know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean.
In college, I was like, bro, I go to PWI, like I said, and I got a job like a year ago too, where I was like working at a gas station, which was in a more black part of town, and that had been a long time since I had been around like a majority of black people in a while. And for a minute there, I was like, wait a second, I forgot how to code switch for a second, and like it took like a while for me to like regain like the ability to basically talk to black people, because like I was just in this space for so long, learning how to like not talk to black people.
I have the exact same experience. Well, not in the exact same environment, but like I said, I lived in Scotland. I've lived here for like, how long has it been? Since 2010, basically. And about 3 years ago, I discovered this club. I happened to go, because I barely go out, because again, I don't feel comfortable. There's no space that I feel comfortable, so I barely ever go out. And also when you do go out, especially with colleagues, eventually the racism comes out and everyone gets drunk, and you know they get so I started, this is when I started to slowly kind of I was breaking down.
Breaking news here: Scotland, Aberdeen is not the most woke place.
Oh my goodness. But you know, the funny thing is that the main reason, my friends who I no longer speak to, my friends, they all English. So I
thought I nearly had something there.
But no, honestly, like the Scottish, I don't know actually, you know, I can honestly say in terms of like actual Scottish people, I haven't experienced particularly like just, but they've been sort of like no, actually that's not true. They are the ones that are like, oh, I was scared, you scared me, oh, I was terrified of you at first, but you're just so amazing. What kind
of like benevolent racism, right? It's like
it's like what like,
oh, you're nicer than I was expecting. Okay.
And they literally say that as well.
That's a backhanded compliment if I ever had one, right?
But I remember, so I never went out, and this time I went out with my best friend who is Scottish, but technically she's my fiance's cousin, so I don't know, whatever. But anyway, so she no, I just totally played her down. She's my best friend. I love her to pieces. Suddenly beautiful. But she definitely thinks differently as well. She's just, I don't know, like I think you can usually tell the type of person. She's not one of those people who like loves like music by black artists and stuff, like, and then it's like, but if you can listen to her music, why would you disrespect their race? Like, she's obsessed, like she loves Jimi Hendrix, all of that stuff, you know. So so she kind of grew up on that, so she's just got this sort of love and genuine sort of respect for black folk, and she sees the things that aren't right, like she sees it, she doesn't try to hide it away from it. I guess that's probably answers the whole ally, can you be an ally? Well, yes, like but I think if you weren't nurtured in that, I don't believe you, basically. But yeah, so I went to a club and like I was like I like all types of music, like, but my favorite band is Radiohead, like, you know, like I've gone through different phases in my life, but I love all types of music. But obviously I have my favorite types, like mainly rock and stuff. But anyway, so we got to this club and I was like I remember just being like, oh my God, there's black people. I was like, there's black people. I just couldn't stop. Like I wasn't even drunk at this point. I was just like, oh my God, this has been here all this time. I just didn't know. I really didn't know. But then I was so happy, but then at the same time, I was like, shit. How do I act? Like,
I forgot how to do it.
Yeah, I was like, how do I act? Like, how do I speak?
Yeah.
Like,
I forgot how to black.
Speaking like this, how do I speak normally? Like, wait, like, and I'm like, but you're from Peckham. Don't forget, you're from Peckham. You're a Peckham girl. Like, listen, like, and I literally spent almost the entire time in this club freaking the fuck out. Sorry, freaking out because I was just like, I don't know how to be with my own people anymore because I've tried to like mold myself so much to make these people not scared of me, you know, and also to not get in trouble for being too, you know, or to be the angry black, you know, all these different things. I had totally shrunk myself and in nature, I'm just you know, like.
So it sounds like for all the white people worried about having to tread on eggshells, you're not alone. Like black people often feel that way too.
Oh,
yeah,
dude! Like
you either choose to play the game or you don't. And if you don't play the game, you're dangerous.
You have to like basically, like kind of whenever race comes up in like a classroom or a race topic, I play this game where I stay quiet for like the first little round of like discussion just to see what people say, you know, just to see where everyone's head is, and then I give my opinion. And it's like, your opinion is always like both the center and not the center, because everyone wants to know what you have to say because, you know, obviously you're the one probably dealing with the most racism, so to speak, but at the same time, they're not listening all the time. It's just like, yeah, that's really sad. You know, we try to be allies and then on to the next thing.
Yeah, you find yourself considering their feelings and like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm not to be rude or whatever, but I'm like, why do I care?
Yeah, it's funny to have a conversation about racism, and then at the end, the white people are like, "So, am I okay? Can we talk about my feelings for a bit?" I mean, I opened this podcast with, "Hey guys, what about fragile white feelings?" And then everything you just unloaded on me, I'm like, I've just been deleting questions on my board here. I'm like, yeah,
no,
that puts that in perspective. That puts that in perspective.
But at least
that puts that in perspective.
But at least you ask rather than assume. And I think this is the issue. You get people who consider themselves allies and then decide what is offensive to black people, decide the things that white people shouldn't say and do. And then what ends up happening is, like it ends up coming back into us where people like, see, racist, all of this has gone too far and blah, blah, blah. And it's like the woke mob, I mean, I believe there's a woke mob. There really is. Like it's getting ridiculous. But there are also people who are they're stoking these tensions. You know, I saw something today that was trending on Twitter about the University of Manchester has now introduced this new language thing where you can't say mother or father. You have to say, what is it? You can't say mother or father, and you can't say guys or woman or man. Right. Like there's
all gender neutral language. Have we lost?
Yeah, all gender neutral language. But the thing is like, you know, I was sitting there thinking, who decided this? Like, who did any non-binary or trans people or anyone who would be affected by this? Yeah. Like, did you actually consult with them, or did you decide this is what they want? Because what's then happened is you've decided that this group needs this type of, like, you're fighting for this group. You didn't actually check with this group what they actually need, really matters.
Once again, Rosario, perfect segue into the territory I want to head. So often this conversation is framed by two groups, and it comes down to power, right? Like one is liberal, middle class, educated, right? Like so often the conversation is sort of like dinner table etiquette, right? Like it's these people in power deciding what the rules are. I think you can describe any movement as a mob because that's social media right now. It's just a bunch of people shouting. But that detracts from, I think, the meat of the point that some people have. And often as well, there's this big, H-Bomber guy did a great thing on it. There's a few takes on it where you get woke brands. What was it? Aunt Jemima's pancakes or whatever, like during the height of last year was like, did we mention that we're going to change? And it, like, no one asked for that. No one cares. Like, stop taking up column inches. Like,
stop being racist. Stop being racist.
Well, sure, but no one was
changing-
protesting for the pancakes, right?
Exactly.
Like, it was a distraction.
stop-
it was just sucking attention away from the
Exactly.
things that
It's
people actually want, which are
performative
pretty
bullshit.
clear. Performative bullshit, no, thank you.
Like they're not doing it for us because you didn't ask us anything. Furthermore, what you should do is pay Aunt Jemima's bloody family. That's what you need to do, or whoever's
Jack Daniels whiskey, right? You know the story of Jack Daniels?
Yep.
They're like, oh, and there was this nice black fella at the bottom of the garden who came up with the recipe. You're like, oh God, I hope you paid him some of the money his family are owed.
He didn't see
like we didn't tell you that's an issue. We didn't say anything. And then what happens is all these right-leaning or whatever you'd call them, like starts coming and starts abusing us for things we didn't ask for. Because that we want actual change. We want actual reform. We're not asking for you to change the names and the titles or to ban books or do all this other stuff. Stop doing things in our name. Ask us and listen to what we are telling you that we need. That's all you have to do. But all of these things are to score points. I don't feel like that. That's why I have issue with the whole allyship stuff, because who are you really doing it for? Like, who is it really? Because when it comes down to it, when you're actually faced with the situation where you can show true allyship, your feelings get involved. And it proves that it's all just performative. You think you're amazing. You think you're all of these things. But if we didn't tell you you are all of these things, trust and believe you are not that.
Just a quick example, and then I'll hand over to ranting. I thought what happened recently with Meghan and Harry was a perfect summary of Britain's position. We spent a year being like, poor racism in America, that's terrible, all the hashtags, right, all the blackouts. And then one person said, maybe some British institutions are occasionally racist. And everyone's like, oh, what the fuck? No, I'm out. Like, fucking bullshit.
Racism doesn't exist outside of America, guys.
I mean, it's an American sport, right?
Yeah, it's just Americans are like more overt and just less shameful. Ours just get published.
But no, that's the problem. That isn't the case. There's a belief that they're more overt. No, that isn't the case. It's this belief that because slavery happened in the US, it's overtly racist. Actually speak to Black UK heads. We promise you, it's very blatant. I mean, I've told you that I was straight up called the N-word a number of times. I've had people who think it's appropriate to say in my face that, Black people are so angry, like, or if Black people just did this or did that, then this wouldn't happen. It's just that they don't admit to it. It happens and it's very overt. It's clear. But then as soon as you tell them what they're doing and call them out on it, it's like, no, I'm not this, I'm not that. And they do the same thing of, they do the same thing of comparing it to the US, saying, but no, it's not like, because they're thinking in the US, oh, it's real bad in the US. Oh, it's this and that. Like, stop comparing, because it's not even an oppression Olympics type of thing. Like, it's a thing of it's happening on both sides. Okay, it's simply happening on both sides. And to say that one is more overt than the other is basically reducing the impact and the effect of it. We're in an institution that's still living in the system that birthed and colonialism, like literally slavery in America would never have happened if not for British colonialism. Let's just get that very clear. Like, it started from them going into Africa, then bringing slaves over to the Americas and the Caribbean. Like, we have actual direct descendants of slaves also in the UK. It's not different. It's just that there's American news and information is worldwide. Everyone hears about it, but rarely do Americans
direct descendants
look at other people's.
And also direct descendants of slave owners who still have positions of power and privilege because of that wealth. We were still paying for the emancipation of slaves in the Caribbean in our taxes up until just 2015 or 2018. So this amazes me with the conversation about Aunt Jemima's pancakes. You're like, no, like if you actually, and they did this with. Wall Street movement as well, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we just don't know what these people want. They're just an angry mob. And you're like, no, they're really fucking clear. Like, there's some really clear things you could do, starting with reparations, like, or just ending the economic disparity. Like, what are you doing to address that other than rebranding a pancake label? Like,
and still none of the money going to the family of the person that you use their image and so on and so forth. Like, you know, like
I don't remember anyone asking for that either. I don't really think I've ever.
Yeah, they're not. But it's just that if they're gonna do anything, you know, you get what I mean? Like, they're the ones keeping that money still. Like, you change, okay, you change the image.
Ranting. Like, I'm gonna give you the floor, Rosario. I love everything you've said, but I'm gonna pass the mic.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, it's weird because I've never heard anyone like actually say like, hey, you know, I'm really offended by Aunt Jemima, like being represented that way, which, you know, I get it completely, but I've really never heard anyone like make that their like fight. And I feel like if you were gonna do that, you could have just silently done that and just, you know, like every other brand who changes their box and just kind of put it on the box, like new look. But no, they had to like capitalize on it during like all the BLM protests.
Yeah, it felt like imagine the ads popping up on the George Floyd video and something like, hey, I'm a corporation with goods and services to sell.
Right, everyone coming out to show solidarity for BLM, but at the moment that thing comes at your front door, you're going to be, this has gone too far.
Exactly.
It's always like gone too far, doing too much. And what is the correct way to protest mass murder against your people? And, you know, a love of centuries of oppression and wage slavery and no lack of healthcare and no lack of education. What is the appropriate way to nicely ask the people of power who never listened to you who've never listened to you before this, to improve your situation? You know, I feel like there's like a lack of like, you know, realism to it. I feel like we're like, oh, we just have to, you know, peacefully protest and ask nicely, and then they'll give us the thing. But like, do we really believe that? Do we actually believe that just by asking for these things, we'll get them? I mean, so let's step outside of Black issues. Let's step outside of Black issues for a minute. Like, literally, we've been waiting for marijuana to be legalized in the US for damn near decades. We've been waiting for like more healthcare, more like a minimum wage increase for decades. And people have been asking for that for decades, but we haven't really gotten that. So it seems like, what exactly do you want this protest to look like? And how do you think that's going to actually make people want to like?
I remember when everyone was having a shit fit about Colin Kaepernick, right? Like, oh, that was too much. And you're like, oh, okay. But now it's like, oh, why can't you be more peaceful? Like, you didn't listen to peaceful protests.
Exactly.
You had your chance.
Exactly.
I'm glad Colin Kaepernick did that, because I end up using him as an example many times in conversations about peaceful versus violent protests. And there's always MLK. I'm like, well, he died. Like, and also peaceful protest has been done a many a times before this, like a many of times. And usually people get upset either way. I don't think the issue is that people are destroying things. I think you're a little mad about Black people not staying in their place.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had to look into it, because one of the joys of having a podcast that people assume is centrist is I'm forever arguing with angry boomers in the comments. So I had this great conversation where, like, I do this all the time, go down the rabbit hole. Someone says, okay, but like, I support Black rights, but unfortunately, you know, they should have been more peaceful. And what about the looting? And what about the murders? And I was like, I hate every time I read one comment by one idiot. I know I'm the one that has to spend 3 hours reading. So I did, and I looked into it. And do you know the murders that happened at the Black Lives Matter protests were mostly of Black people or far right people fighting with the police, either murdering the police or being murdered by the police. Yep. Those are most of the murders. So when people
were instigated by the police, so it's like, I don't know why are we talking about right?
So when everyone's like, "Oh, look at all the violence," you're like, "I did. I looked into it because you said I should," and it's not the story you're trying to claim, dude. Yeah. It's just not.
And I hate it because it's really pushing me further and further away from like the political American politics, so to speak. I'm very jaded towards both parties, and it's just like if it keeps going this route, I'm going to end up a fucking anarchist.
I told you I started this podcast being like, how can we shift, you know, more people in the center or more people on the extremes towards a more reasonable conversation and open minding? And I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's like I didn't expect myself to be the far left type, but the more like I live in America, the less hope I have in like American politics, and the more I find myself gravitating towards anarchist theory or more leftist theory that's like not mainstream American ways of viewing things, if that makes sense.
And I think that's the thing. A lot of people say that are trying to make some counter argument for it. They'll say like, oh, so, you know, I thought we didn't want segregation. It's like, that's not the issue. It's that we're tired. We are so sick and tired that it's getting more and more to a point where, you know, our generation and the younger generations are just saying like, we're done. Like we don't even want any of it. We're actually happy to just never mix with any of you, like, and stuff like, you know, like, it's not like it's what they necessarily want, but when you've been hurt so many times and you've been traumatized so many times and no one's listening, no one cares, and they always find a way to center themselves in it, you just get fed up. Like, you know, the politics, I mean, politics is trash. It is what it is, you know. But I mean, it just feels like it's so bad, you know, like it just, I don't know, it just feels so bad, and we're tired. Everyone's tired.
Sure, for sure. It's like, oh God, being Black in like this 21st century is so fucking exhausting. If like, James Baldwin had this quote, like, to be conscious and Black is to be in a rage at all times. And I was like, wow, like at that moment in my life, I was like, you hit the nail on the head. Like the more I like read things and like become more educated, the more like I just find everyday issues where it's like, wow, like there's like something everywhere. Like this racism shit is literally everywhere. It's kind of annoying.
Yep.
So here's where I'm going to do the annoying devil's advocate thing I warned you about at the start. What do you say to the criticism of that, which says that, but isn't the arc of history in the right direction? Aren't we? Isn't progress being made? Aren't we moving in a less racist direction? Isn't, yes, to say 2021 is exhausting, like, but isn't it less racist than the 80s and less racist than the 70s and less racist than the 40s and less racist than the 20s?
I guess I'm thankful that I wasn't born into slavery, but then again, I can still become a slave. So is it really that much better? You know what I mean? It's like, I guess people expect, like, since, you know, we don't have these Jim Crow laws anymore, we don't have like, you know, outright segregation, that is better, but the effects are still there. Like, you know, the people who raised the people who supported Jim Crow are very still alive and well, and they're still making decisions. Places are still segregated. Black people are still being underpaid, you know, still being arrested and made to be slaves for billionaires. It's like, I can see what people say it has gotten better, quote, quote, but at the same time, I feel like it's just evolved, in my opinion.
Yeah. And often, as we said before, like this token, you know, the conversation's getting more real and more open, but there actually is very little structural change. I think the best way I had this described is like, often the right phrases as, well, what law is racist? You know, like, what law is? It's illegal to be racist.
That's such like a bad faith way of like framing systemic racism, and like it works to like unpolitical people, and it angers me that it works that way for some people. Like, yeah, there's no Black laws, so there can't be racism. Like, if you use that definition, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but because of the intersection of class, privilege, I don't know. Over to you, Rosario.
I think things are definitely better, without a doubt. Like if you compare it to earlier times, but should it be that? Because no matter what happens, let's put race and racism aside. Through every single time period, generation, there's always, you know, a set of issues, a set of problems that is dealt with. So naturally you want to evolve and, you know, things move and change.
And there's always a set of people hoping to move things forwards and better, and a set of people dragging their heels being like, whoa. The thing I hear all the time, look, I support Black Lives Matter, but what if it goes too far? And you're like,
what's too
then
far?
You have my attention. Like when that happens, the day that comes,
the day it goes too far is the day you'll probably get the people at the top to actually respond.
And this is the thing of what I don't want support with condition. I don't want love with condition. I don't want friendship with conditions. I don't want conditions and any because it should just be a simple thing of, right, this is what's happening today. History is there and we can look at it and we can learn from it. But today, it's like you know, when people say they're going through something and they'll be like, oh, but it could be worse, you know, I should just get over it, you know, it could be worse, I could be starving, or I could be, you know, homeless. And I normally say to, you know, a friend, or, you know, whoever it is that's saying it, I'll be like, look, like, yeah, of course, there's always someone that's in a worse situation than you, but you can only react to the things that happen to you. Your standards of, or your tolerance and the things that can hurt you, and, you know, how you react to that and how it impacts on your day-to-day life, is basically within your own experience, within how you know how to deal with it. So drawing any comparisons is neither here nor there. It doesn't actually help you in any way, because it's not fair to do to yourself, because what you experience is what you are experiencing is what you know. And that's kind of like how I feel. It's like I have all this information, I have all this knowledge, I know things have improved. In fact, you know, knowing what my parents went through, I know things have improved for my generation. I know that, like, but it doesn't mean that the things that are happening today aren't still traumatizing, aren't still hurtful, you know, aren't still frustrating. If racism was gone, then we could be like, well, you know, thank goodness I didn't go through what they went through then. But we're not about to have you continue to treat me the way you tried to treat my ancestors, except that you think it's better. Because that's their argument. They always use the thing of, oh, but it's not as bad as it used to be. What do you know? What do you know? You're not.
And I feel like they were saying the same thing, like in the 60s. Like, well, at least you're not slaves anymore. Now you just have your own spaces. I'm like, yeah, I feel like we're always going to be this thing where, like, it's not as bad as it back then. It's not as bad as it was before. Like, we should always be striving to, like, improve relations. I feel like it's
just gaslighting. It's gaslighting. It's
I mean, like, and the funny thing is, with all these like right-wing talking heads, they're all about improvement, growth, like getting more, like getting ahead, right? Like, at the moment someone's like, oh, but look at all these problems, they're like, oh, it's just wallowing in self-pity. Like,
yeah, like, let the right wings tell that poverty is a complete choice.
Yeah.
Really frustrating.
I got nothing for them, but for you guys, I got so much love. That was brilliant, really educational, enlightening, interesting, fun, scary. I'm going to have to put a shit ton of trigger warnings at the start of this episode. Thanks for that. But much needed. Yeah, thank you very much. Is there any closing thoughts, anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, subscribe to Deranged Minority on YouTube. New videos when I make videos, because upload scheduling is hard with a job in college, but you know, videos at least every month.
Wow, I didn't realize you're doing job and college, because it's quality content, man. It's like very, very impressive.
Yeah, my upload schedule is crap because, like, college and like jobs, but like during the summer we were getting unemployment. It's like the first time I could say I was proud of America for giving me like money for once, like to stay in my house. I had money, so I didn't have any reason to go to work, no school, so I had all the time I wanted to like upload weekly. But then the unemployment went away, and then I had to go back to school. So I was like, damn it, like.
Your YouTube channel is the strongest argument for universal basic income, man, I've ever heard, because I loved it, man. I really like keep up the
Yeah.
good work. Like,
Yeah.
please, I recommend everyone check it out. It's brilliant. Very,
Yes.
very like in
My day
deep,
job.
nuanced, thoughtful content.
Yep. And desperately, we need it. We really do. We need it.
Thank
We're
you.
not a monolith, and I think we forget that sometimes. Like, honestly, I really do, and I'm putting this on my people, like our people. Like, I do think that we forget that sometimes, and you're not even allowed to think differently. Like, you'll never hear me call a person a coon or anything like that, because no one has to agree with you. No one has to agree, even if it might be harmful and it might feel like it's a betrayal. No one has to agree with you. No Black person has to be the same, and we're not anyway. We can't say we are. We can't say we're not a monolith, and at the same time, excommunicate or be horrible to Black folk that don't think like us.
Yeah.
But again,
I mean, including Candice Owens and Kanye
including
West.
Candice Owens,
Yeah, she's still Black. She's very much
still
Black.
Black.
It's
Yeah.
weird to say that there's people aren't Black or with like things like that. Like you were just saying, completely. Like you're just saying, like they're not very helpful to the community or whatever. But at the end of the day, if her fame and fortune went away and she walked down the street, she would be harassed by police just like the rest of us.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Same fight at the end of the day, whether they want to admit it or not.
Yep. And Candice, I'm so great example, like Candice Owens. Like, I don't agree with. I don't think I agree with anything that she says or feels.
Almost, yeah. No, I like.
But
wow,
I genuinely-
just everything in column wrong. My favorite is her attempt at climate change science debunking. You're like, what? What?
Everything is.
Who gave you a microphone?
But again, like to me, it's not. She doesn't lose her. You can't revoke someone's Black card. A Black person, you're Black.
Yeah.
And. I don't hate her or dislike her even. She has a right to her own opinion. And that's it. That's literally all I think about. She has a right to her own opinion. And if people don't like it, don't watch it. But yeah, so I don't know. But in terms of me, like I write. Like I write.
You
I
write
play
great.
Games. You want to play games?
Highly recommend Rosario Blue's blogs, articles.
Thank
check it
out. Thank you. You can follow me on socials.
You did a wonderful piece on sort of how Gamergate never really ended, and it continues to be a toxic community, which unfortunately we didn't have time to get into today. But
God, and there was some madness that happened recently as well.
If you guys would have me both, I'd happily talk with you any other time about any other topics you want to talk about. Like,
I'd be down. This is fun.
Definitely.
Thanks. I really appreciate you both. Thank you so much, everyone.
No, thank you so much. This was great. I really enjoyed it.
Lovely. Yeah, me too.
A Ranting Minority, you're amazing. Like, honestly, I love everything. I love all your videos. Like, everything that you talk about. Very, very weighted, very, very fair, like, and nuanced, like Chris said. So
yeah, the world needs it.
Obviously, like, I love you. Great. Like, thank you for even having me on. Thank you for asking. Thank you for actually giving us the space to talk as well, because you weren't trying to like come in and like you actually let us speak. You literally did what I
if you've heard my podcast, that's incredibly rare. I especially after a bottle of wine, it just becomes a Chris show, and I'm like, you know what I think.
But yeah, thank you for actually listening and actively listening. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. It was really nice talking to you guys. I had lots of fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it again soon. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the end of lockdown and your studies and your work and everything. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
You too.
All the best.